what I have repeatedly said over the years, that there need to be a paradigm shift that recognizes core national economic interest of Nigeria to be defined by Nigeria and not by another country. Nigeria does not owe South Africa, or for that matter, any country, any apology.
Okay, let me come to Dr. Zwaka. Some other people think, like South Africa, that it was a bit hasty on the part of Nigeria to recognize the NTC as the legitimate representatives of the people of Libya. What do you think?
Well, you see, the argument is neither here nor there. If you say it is a bit too hasty, the problem also will be that if you don't recognize the aspiration, of the Libyans to a government of, their own, because you just imagine somebody who was born in Libya about 42 years ago has been under one government that pretends to allow, the rights of the people, but in reality doesn't recognize anything that affects, the power of the president, of Gaddafi, because he has personalized the country.
Could it be, Dr. Agbaye, that all this while, African leaders, the African Union, including Nigeria, when I talk about African leaders, have humored Muammar Gaddafi all along in his rallying call for United States of Africa?
You have to go back to historical background of Nigeria and, for that matter, other African states. She has been under a military dictatorship, as has been most of African states. And as a result of that, she felt very uncomfortable, as was other African states, to take a position that appears to be against another country, because there was no democracy in Africa, in majority of African states. Just let me give you a little bit of background of South Africa, and for you to understand why she's taking this position and why I do not think that they have the right to decide or dictate for Nigeria. South Africa foreign policy under Mbeki, and for that matter before Mbeki, has been mostly on what is called African Renaissance. And African Renaissance has at the heart of it a neoliberal principles. And neoliberal principles, in a way, led to the erosion of patrimonial states and led to the establishment of what I now call warlord capitalism. In that emerged the likes of Gaddafi, who now wanted to promote United African States as himself as the king of kings. So in order to achieve that objective, he really utilized the state resources in giving funds to some African nations. South Africa was a beneficiary of that. So in line with her interest, it did not come to me as a surprise that the government of Jacob Zuma will want Gaddafi to remain in power. Well, that is his own interest. But it is the height of arrogance for another country to want to dictate what should be the foreign policy interest of another state. While I concede to South African right to toe the path she had, unfortunate as it is. Unfortunate because what South Africa is saying in effect is that the will of the people, the aspiration of the people for a democratic state where the people of Libya are free for the first time in 42 years should not be respected. And you know what this is? It is so unfortunate that a country is taking this position, because if you have been a beneficiary of other states' intervention for the dismantling of apartheid, and then here you do not, it is an oxymoron, a contradiction in terms for him to do so. But again, I concede to his right. But Nigeria has made a decision that is born out of the fact that Nigeria is now in the Committee of Nations, who are democratic, elected leaders. The government of President Goodluck Jonathan has made the right decision The right decision because first, it is in line with the wishes of the people. Two, it is a reconciliation of the Nigerian economic interest, a paradigm shift, if you would, because African states has been the cornerstone of African policy and non-alignment.
May I ask you,
yes.
Do you know what Nigeria's interest in Libya is?
Of course, yes. Let me tell you. Libya is the 17th largest crude oil producer and has the largest oil reserve. Nigeria also as another oil producing nation. We have something in common. Number two, as you rightly said, immigration implication. What happens in Libya has serious economic implication on this country. Number three, we're talking about trade promotion and investments, encouragement of FDI, foreign direct investment. If Libya becomes destabilized, if Libya becomes a stable nation once more, Nigerian businesses could queue in and take advantage of what will be a reconstruction economic enterprise that will take place there. That explains why the United States is interested. That explains why the president of France, Sarkozy, is interested. That explains why Cameron, the Prime Minister of United Kingdom, is interested. Make no mistake about it. This is the 21st century international politics. It must be dictated by core national economic interest, and Nigeria must queue in. Until now, Nigeria will spend so much money liberating South Africa. Not even this day was allowed to operate in South Africa. I'll put it to you one more time. Nigeria spends so much time helping Liberia. No Nigerian company is accessing the fortunes there. Sierra Leone, and the list go on. But in the United States, where her core national economic interest is what defines her foreign policy, in Kuwait, United States companies are the one that leading the reconstruction. In Iraq, it is United States.
But isn't that, you talked about Liberia, you talked about Sierra Leone, and the fact that Nigerian businessmen are not really enjoying what they should in terms of helping to rebuild the economy and the infrastructure in that country. Let me come to Dr. Zuaka. Isn't that a Nigerian problem? Is it the problem of Liberia that Nigerian businessmen are not doing very much business in their country?
It's the problem of Nigeria. You see, the Liberians will not be the ones to tell Nigeria if you are going to intervene in our country, come with your business.
Dr. Agwai,
yes, sir.
He's talked about the fact that there should be some strategic interest.
Yes.
For instance, you mentioned Liberia, Sierra Leone. In all of those places, Nigeria has spent money and a lot of resources. Plenty of foreign policy moves have gone into all of that to ensure that those two countries in West Africa have peace. But in the case of Libya, Nigeria is not doing what it did in Liberia. But at the same time, a decision like this, do you think that it was taken into consideration? Because on this program, I think sometime last year, the then chairman of the House Committee on the Diaspora, Honorable Abike Dabiri, they talk about a number of Nigerians who were in Libyan jails for whatever reason. And there are Nigerians who live in Libya. There are Nigerians who are still in Libya in spite of the evacuation that was done earlier on. What about the interest of those people? The country is in a state of war, and anything can happen to Nigerians who are there.
You have, once again, a very interesting question. At the heart of your question is, do we make our decisions based on strategic, well-defined rules of engagement, where such a recognition will be in line with what we call in Latin a quid pro quo, something for something? My concern is Nigerians' decision, be it domestic or foreign, is not well formatted. There's always in a haste. If it is properly defined along the strategic lines, it will get something in return. It is my hope that prior to making this decision, that Nigeria has strategically looked at what she stands to gain as a result of this recognition. I want to believe that. But if you look at what has been happening, we do not sit down to have a well-defined rules of engagement. And I give you an example, and that's what gives me concern, and that explains why we do not get something in return as a result of what we do. Just a couple of days ago, while Nigeria foreign policy is now undergoing this paradigm shift with the use of trade and encouragement of investment, which is in line with what it should be. But to now say that any investor coming to Nigeria does not have to have visa, you just get the visa upon arrival, you are making yourself, we are creating what I call a porous border. In as much as I agree with Mr. President, while receiving the special advisor to Jacob Zuma, the president of South Africa, and saying that there must be ways and means, we must ease visa issuing procedures. That should be the case. If you now say because you are interested in attracting foreign investors, and you tell them that upon arrival they can have multiple visas, what you are just because you want to facilitate that. As a foreign policy strategy, it is not good, because what you lead now that you have all manners of people coming in, colluding with their partners, and then Nigeria will turn into, again, a gateway for criminals of all form of people. The point there you are making, and which is in line with what Prof is saying, and I agree in total, is that each decision we make along the line of foreign policy must recognize first, how does it advance our interest? And in advance our interest, we must also recognize that we must have a well-defined domestic policy, because foreign policy is nothing but an extension of domestic policy. So the domestic policy of Nigeria must be in reconciliation with what Nigeria wants to have as a foreign policy, and that's what is not happening now. That's my concern.
We have just a minute or so left.